We already got people in the waiting room ready to go. Got Coach AB here. Dane, you want to show them what you're drinking tonight? Who your beverage is sponsored by?
It doesn't matter what I'm drinking, but always by the Turner Group.
Turn it a little bit more. There you go.
The Turner Group. Sorry, Colin.
It's like just really off.
Dane, you got to show it to where they can actually see the logo. Oh, boy.
Let's go.
All right.
That's them.
People are streaming in to the stream. Is that correct? Is that what's happening?
They're filling in. They're filing in.
Trickling in. There's I don't know. All right. Well, hello everyone who's here so far. This will be edited out for the podcast version. If you're here watching our live stream, as we discuss FSU's 2023 roster composition, doing a little inventory, starting with the offense today. Hello, welcome. I'm Brendan Sinone. I got to, I guess, your top right corner up here. We have Brett Nevitt. Brett, hello.
Hello. Good to see you.
It's great to see you. You excited for baseball season? Starting to kind of get into gear here a little bit?
Certainly. 37 days. 37 days.
He's counting them down.
But who's counting? That's psychotic. Also, if you're listening to the On the Bench feed of this in the morning, also psychotic, but thank you for doing both. We appreciate it. We appreciate the obsession. Down to my bottom right, Dane, Duncan, Draper. I got the order of that wrong, but that's fine. Everyone knows what's up. Hi, Dane.
Hello. How are you doing, Brennan?
I'm great. Thanks, Dane.
That's good.
Right beneath me, Zach Blostein. Hello, Zachary.
What's up?
All right, let's see. So, British go Ryan Day and dye the beard. Yeah, it's getting gray really fast. Even the scalp is getting gray quickly. It's getting gray fast. Got a little Corella DeVille going on here. All right, let's get going for the podcast section of this. We got 142 people watching. They want to know about Florida State stuff, not about my hair, what Dane's drinking, and his horrible directional skills. Do it right one more time, Dane. The Turner Group.
The Turner Group.
The Turner Group.
He still doesn't.
The Turner Group.
Did he get it right, Zach? I don't have my screen.
I figured it out.
Okay. All right, here it is for the podcast. Everyone, welcome. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to On the Bench. I'm your host for this episode, Brendan Sinone, joined by Houdini, Dane Train, Draper. Dane, hello.
Hello.
We don't have to go over this again. We did it for the
We're
live stream.
introduced
What up, Zach? What up, Brett?
What up?
So this will be the first part of a 2-day in a row series where we take an extensive look at what FSU's roster will look like in the 2023 season. I know it's really early in the offseason to be doing that, but most of the pieces FSU will be working with this upcoming year are in place, and it's a season to be excited about. FSU is getting a lot of buzz as a top 10 team, potentially top 5 team, depending on who you ask. Dane said there was no chance. How you feeling about that, Dane, now that all the portal stuff is starting to settle in and people are starting to put out their way too early top 25s? FSU's in the top 5 quite a bit.
I think there's something to be said about that, how they've exceeded our expectation and stuff, and we expected a big portal haul, I guess. But no, I still don't think we're starting top 5. I think that's a bunch of garbage, Brendan.
Whoa! Hot takes.
Right.
Oh, jeez, dude.
We're like 2 minutes in, Dave.
Dane's drunk already. Oh boy. But so tonight it's the young guns, even myself with the gray beard. Tomorrow we will have the X's and Knowles crew, Trey Rowland, Coach AB, Kev Little, joined by the one, the only Chris Nee. But Chris is on Baba watch tonight, so we could not pull him away from hoops, shockingly. So as we get into FSU's roster composition on offense today, again, tomorrow will be defense. There's a few things we have to talk about before we start breaking down the roster, right? Let's start off with the big news from yesterday, and that's that Patrick Surtain will be hired as FSU's defensive back coach. The search lasted a little bit more than a week. Zach and I got word yesterday that FSU had a candidate lined up, finalized. He had to go through and inform everyone and do it the right way. And then later on in the evening, ESPN reported that Patrick Surtain, who you guys will know his name maybe from his son, who's a badass cornerback in the NFL. You might be old enough like myself to know Patrick Surtain when he was a badass himself playing cornerback for the Miami Dolphins. He was a high school coach for American Heritage for about a decade, rolled out some really dominant teams there, produced a lot of high caliber players who played on Saturdays and Sundays. And also he's been an assistant with the Miami Dolphins this year. So quite the resume for Patrick Surtain. He has not coached at the college level, but a resume to be excited about. Dane and Brett, let's start with you guys. What was your reaction? Dane, I'll throw this to you. When you first found out, when you saw the Twitter feed or the text, and I'm not sure how you found out, but whenever you saw Patrick Surtain's name emerged as the guy. What was your initial reaction?
Yeah, I definitely excited. I think it's a bit of like an out thinking outside of the box kind of hire, which is cool. You were looking at someone that was either going to be a good, like you put in writing, you said a good technician, or someone who can be like a dog recruiter in South Florida specifically. And with Patrick Surtain, I think that
you got it right.
Yeah,
Good job,
thank you.
man.
Oh, by the way, I always want to say Sam Madison because Miami Dolphins coach. They play cornerback together. I'm an old head.
Best friends.
Yeah, so in my mind, I want to say Patrick Surtain, Sam Madison, both had sons.
Surtain.
Yeah, my point
Surtain.
was he's gonna be our coach. You gotta start saying it right at some point. So let's start practicing that now, Brendan.
I'm Surtain that I can say it correctly.
There you go. Perfect. But I think he can fill both of those. He has endless ties in South Florida. He's such a credible, reputable name in South Florida. He has this, history as a Pro Bowl cornerback in the NFL. And he's been a coach down there at American Heritage, which kind of lends itself to the recruiting side. But he can coach and be the technician too. I think there's a lot of encouragement that he can be at least.
Brett,
so, yeah.
Brett, what about you with your really cool hipster glasses? Tell us when you have your glasses on when you were scrolling through the text thread and you're like, oh my God, it's Patrick Surtain.
Yeah,
Surtain.
for sure.
I can't do it.
Surtain. I was certainly surprised at first, but like Dane said, excited, and it's just someone that everyone's going to know the name and it's going to be recognizable. And like I think you wrote about it a little bit, it just checks off a lot of the boxes that they were looking for in a candidate for the spot. So definitely excited for that move.
All right, Zachary, we were chasing this story, but you were like a dog with a bone on this one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk. let's talk about it. In between all the Daryl Jackson hoopla and debacle, once the dust settled there, everyone was like, "Let's talk about the DB coach hire." We were like, "All right, I guess let's start reporting on it." So let's go through the process. What we knew about this hire. We were fortunate to get the name, I guess, shortly before, but we didn't know for sure if it was going to be Pat Surtain. Got it. So let us know the background a little bit, please, of how this all came to be.
Yeah, so obviously Marcus Woodson, Florida State's previous DB coach, leaves for Arkansas to be their co-defensive coordinator a little bit over a week ago, and the search began then for a new DB coach. At first, we thought that the title was going to be just a corners coach because that's what FSU is kind of looking for, since Adam Fuller, the defensive coordinator, already coaches safeties for Florida State. But we learned actually within the last few days that the job title would be secondary coach, which we believe probably is tied to the ability to pay that position or allocate more money to that position, which is what we expect to happen with the Pat Surtain hire. Brendan's trying to confuse me, but yeah. So early on in the search, I heard that Mike Norvell was active among his coaching tree, both on his staff and elsewhere. He was also at the AFCA, I think it's called, AFCA coaching convention over there in Charlotte over the weekend. And I believe that bled actually into Monday and Tuesday as well. So was around a bunch of coaches. I think him and Adam Fuller, who I'll talk about in a second, actually conducted some interviews either there or virtually there over the past few days. There was a good amount of candidates. As we noted on the site multiple times, there were a lot of people across the country, a lot of defensive back coaches interested in this position, both at Power 5 spots, maybe G5, some guys that are, currently jobless looking for jobs that have been at Power 5s before, and former players. We're all interested in this position, which is different than what we've seen kind of under Norvell's tenure here so far, right? I think, to start off, there was a good amount of interest because of Norvell's, reputation of building up his coaches and his coaches going on and becoming, successful coordinators and then head coaches down the line. And I think that kind of went away with FSU struggles on the field the first few years under Norvell, but after a 10-3 season, you get some juice and you're able to go out and try and hire a dude to come in and replace Marcus Woodson. And I think they did that with Pat Surtain. Wanted to note, I think Adam Fuller had a huge say in this hire. He, like I noted before, is involved in coaching the secondary. That's one of his specialties. That's, his position group, I believe, is the safeties on the defense. So I was told that Mike Norvell gave him a lot of say in the hire. I believe he conducted interviews himself, and they ran through a bunch of candidates and came down to Mr. Surtain, who was obviously working for the Miami Dolphins, still working with the Dolphins in their playoff run. He's expected to join FSU staff after that ends on Sunday.
All right, so Adam Fuller, the king of the portal and maybe the king of the hiring process, because I think he nailed this. I do think we as the collective, we as media are actually pretty awful at we're good at analyzing some things, but we're pretty bad at analyzing coaching hires. I feel like we all kind of do the same thing. Go and look at a guy's resume of
it's a hard thing to do.
It is. It's easier to go and turn on a huddle and be like, oh, this kid can play football or not, at least for me. And there's so much of this that is about fit, right? And you can even make a hire that makes sense on paper. And then it doesn't work out for whatever reason. It just didn't fit. You just didn't catch some breaks, whatever. So we're evaluating this solely on paper, right? There's nothing else we can do. And especially with Pat Surtain, I got it right that time. You can only do its projection because he hasn't coached at the college level. But the resume is impressive. You have some experience coaching in the NFL this year. Dolphins DBs were doing pretty good before a bunch of injuries. He obviously played the position at an extremely high level in the NFL. His son is an elite cornerback in the NFL. I took him in my GM league a year ago. GM of the year. What are we going to do? First round pick, top 10. And I think that kind of shows okay, his son is probably a better cornerback in the NFL than Pat was. And Pat was an all pro. So that shows you a level of he can pass that on and teach him some things. So that's good. But the American heritage background, Zach, let's talk about that real quick because we focused on this hire being one of the two aspects can be either technician, which I think Pat Surtain is going to have that ability to do it based on what he's done in the NFL. But then two, could he recruit South Florida? And he hasn't recruited at the college level. However, as well as I do, there's a ton of recruiting that high school coaches have to do in South Florida. American heritage among the best in that region of getting guys to come play for their schools. So what do we think Pat offers in terms of recruiting acumen, connections? Maybe is that a big part of this hire?
Yeah, definitely. I've actually been Dane, Chris, and I have put up a recruit reaction story to the hire. 10 plus recruits already reacted, either defensive backs or guys that are in South Florida have all reacted to the news, and it's all been pretty positive. I know in talking to some people down there within the last day since the hire was not made official, but since we confirmed it was happening after the Pete Thamel report yesterday, people are really optimistic about it. I know that he has obviously a lot of relationships. Surtain does at American Heritage, being the head coach there, winning 3 state titles. And he coached up, a lot of guys that FSU fans should be familiar with. Brian Burns, Tavares McFadden, guys that went to other schools that are, that are in the NFL. Tyson Campbell, his son, obviously, Pat Surtain II, Jr. Aronde Gadsden at Syracuse, James Houston, Will Allen, Marco Wilson, Devontae Brown, who's now going to Miami, Marvin Jones Jr. The list goes on and on. They've had dudes at that school, and he's built a lot of inroads because of that in the South Florida community. And he has respect at other schools. He's really close friends with head coaches at Chaminade, St. Thomas Aquinas, other powerhouses in South Florida. So
schools that FSU is trying to get in with consistently and drew players from. Yeah.
They landed a guy like Edwin Joseph, who was one of the quickest guys to respond to the hire. I think he was ecstatic. He was made aware of it. He told us a little bit before. He had told us that he was made aware a little bit before of the hire, before it became public. So, yeah, he's excited, and he's obviously out of Chaminade Madonna, the school I just mentioned. So, yeah, a lot of excitement in South Florida about this hire. I think the one thing that questions me a little bit, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on this, is is this considered a gamble because he's not a guy that's coached at the college level and has recruited at the college level? Because, there's a lot of skills that come with that. Obviously, you can build some of that skill being a head coach in a talent-rich area like South Florida, like you were mentioning, Brendan. But is this a guy that might need some acclimation period to getting used to this recruiting at this level?
Yeah, it's not a surefire, that he can do it. You think he can. I'm sure Mike Norvell is a really good evaluator of coaching talent. So let's call it a calculated gamble,
Yeah.
maybe.
No, I don't think it's super risky.
Yeah, I think it's there's no such thing as a sure thing when you're hiring a coach, especially one, again, I'm not going to gloss over that he hasn't coached at the college level, but I am excited. I think of the names that we started to get and started to see kind of trickle out after the initial hot board, which is really just connecting dots initially, right? When we started seeing some of the names, that was the one that got me excited because of what it can be. Maybe not what it is right now, but what Pat Surtain can end up becoming. I'm nailing it now. Surtain. What it could end up becoming in a couple of years down the road. I think right away it gives you credibility, like you mentioned, Zach, in South Florida. That's huge. But he's someone who knows how to play the position and seems to know how to coach the position based on all the defensive backs that he's turned out at the high school level. Now in college, it's funny. One of my buddies is a Dolphins fan, and he's on all the Dolphins insider boards and stuff like that. This isn't a report. This is just me talking about a friend who's on a message board and pays for different discords and whatnot. But apparently he's well respected with what he did with the Dolphins this year and helped Sam Madison out there. So yeah, I think it's a good hire. I think it's a really good hire with a ton of upside. It has legitimate A+ upside if you hit on this, which Mike's a gambler. He takes risks. He risked it all on Jordan Travis this year and it paid off. So Mike is no stranger to not gun shy to rolling the dice a little bit. Anything else we want to talk about with the DB hire before we move on to some more news that's been happening in the news before we get to the offensive breakdown? No. All right.
Yeah.
Oh. Let's talk about a news that happened earlier in the day yesterday, and that was the commitment of South Carolina defensive end Gilbert Edmond, another name that I struggle with because I want to put a T at the end of it, but it's Gilbert. He was a starting defensive end for South Carolina this past year. He announced that he's going to transfer to FSU. Believe he'll be enrolled, if it hasn't already happened, on Wednesday by the end of this week. So you got him FSU. This is a 4-star, high upside defensive end. I don't even know if he's going to start, fellas. But he's someone who was really, really solid at times this year for South Carolina. He's grown a ton in the last few years. We talked about before in the podcast. I think he was a 210-pound high school senior. He's 6'5", 250 pounds currently as a redshirt sophomore. This is a multi-year player for FSU. This is not a plug-and-play starting lineup guy necessarily. He could potentially start. He started for an SEC team this past year and was replacement level. But you have him for 2 years, so with Jared Verse coming back, with Derek McClendon coming back, this affords you some ample depth and positional versatility at a premier position, at one of the most important positions to have on the field. Zach, let's get your thoughts on how this recruitment unfolded.
Yeah, so Florida State was the first school to host Gilbert Edmond during the 4-day transfer visit window last week on January 4th. That was a Wednesday. He stayed into Thursday before leaving to go to UF for the rest of that day on Thursday and into Friday. And then I believe he spent the rest of the weekend at LSU. Don't think he made it to a previously planned visit to Ole Miss, which was another school that we had heard could be in contention. But this one ultimately boiled down to Florida State versus LSU. And I kind of wrote about this yesterday, or actually this morning on the site, that I think this is kind of an underrated pickup for Florida State, an underrated win. I think a lot of people kind of glossed over it just because he's not a guy that maybe is, as hyped as Jared Verse or Jermaine Johnson, coming in. But I think he's a guy that helps this program a ton. And another thing that happened during this recruitment is that FSU star edge rusher Jared Verse announced he was returning for another season in the midst of this one. So, if you want to talk about what other schools can use to negative recruit against Florida State, that's probably what it was, right? You can say you're not even going to play. Jared Verse is coming back. They already have a solid rotation. You can come here and play right away at UF or LSU. So, yeah, I think it was a big win for Mike Norvell, John Papuchis, Adam Fuller to land Edmond. And he's a guy that can maybe bridge the gap a little bit and maybe grow within the program along with some of the younger guys like a Patrick Payton, who won the ACC Defensive Rookie of the Year award this past year. And then a guy like Byron Turner, who's been injured but has shown some promise. And if he has some time to develop, could be a dude for you down the line. I think it's a big get, a guy that can maybe not, be guaranteed starting capability right away, but can definitely compete for that throughout spring and then fall camp and into this upcoming season, where FSU obviously wants to beef up their depth along the defensive line, because we know that kind of got tested a little bit this past season.
Yeah, being able to push Byron Turner down to your 5th defensive end instead of your 4th and allow him to kind of evolve at his own pace, I think is a really nice part of this. Brett, what do you like about Edmond's game? I guess what stand out to you in watching some of him?
I think Kevin's hit on it before, that this staff does a good job of getting guys that that have things that you can't really teach. And I think the length and the lateral movement and the ability to take up space in the field that he gives you on the edge is something that you can't really teach. And because you get a guy like Versback and all the depth, like Zach was saying, you can take a chance on the ceiling and have him develop in that room for a while.
Dane informs me in the chat that he has nothing special to say, so I don't feel great about going to Dane here. Let's talk real quick. Let's talk real quick about the portal acquisitions in general. Then, Dane, FSU has the number 1 class in the country, I believe, at this moment for transfer portals. Just like, what has FSU done in the portal through this cycle? And we believe this is it for like pre-spring. We don't think FSU is going to add anyone unless like a really good safety or linebacker, someone else who's too good to pass up on emerges. I think this is it through spring. What have you seen from FSU's collective efforts in the portal the last month or so? What stood out to you, man?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked with Zach about this a lot, and like something they do really well is getting in on guys so early and getting visits really quickly. Like a guy like Fentrell Cypress, who by the end of his, I'm gonna clear my throat now so you don't. Anyway, so a guy like Fentrell Cypress, who he visits UCLA and Florida State ultimately, and those are the only 2 teams he even visits. But he's probably the best corner in the entire portal. And by the end of his recruitment, by the time he does commit to Florida State, like Ohio State, LSU are seemingly very invested in trying to get him. And they don't have a chance to. They can't get him on campus because Florida State was in so early and they had their pitch. And it just seems like something that they've done really well in general and consistently is just getting in on guys early and selling that.
Yeah, something Dane and I talked about as well is like, what's Florida State's, I might do an article on this. What's Florida State's hit rate when they get a transfer portal prospect on campus? I think it's almost 100%. Devontae Brown's the only guy that comes to mind that they missed on, that they hosted for an OV. I can't think of any others off the top of my head. Can you, Brendan?
Their hit rate, I'm trying to think, I'm stalling as we think of it, but I think their hit rate in general for official visits late in the cycle is usually really, really good. We've learned that they don't really waste time on guys that they think they have like an outside shot at. Like it's all pretty much coin flip propositions at worst. I mean, I'm going back to like the 2020 offseason. There was a tight end from UNC who ended up being like the number 2 tight end in Alabama. He was like a blocking tight end. I can't remember the name right now, but he showed up randomly. We didn't know who he was at first, and he ended up getting an Alabama offer. There's not a ton of transfers who show up that they don't go in on.
Yeah, and like specifically this cycle, it's been like a pretty absurd hit rate.
You know what else is kind of cool with that got me thinking, Zach? The amount of teams that they've beaten for guys is really impressive. Like Braden Fisk, they legitimately beat out USC and Notre Dame. Notre Dame was heartbroken on that one. Yeah. They lost a guy from 20 minutes away. Like it made them reconsider like the whole like NIL landscape of where they're at. Like FSU's got them thinking on it. We saw the Daryl Jackson pursuit, like how much Miami wanted Daryl Jackson. That's well documented at this point. Dane outlined this Fentrell Cypress recruitment really well. LSU in Florida wanted Gilbert Edmond really badly. I mean, you go across the board.
Yeah, Kyle Morlock with Tennessee, Jaheim Bell with USC.
Jeremiah
Byers with Oregon, Ohio State, and Maryland. Yeah.
So So FSU is recruiting at what I would call an FSU level in the transfer portal. And we'll see if that translates over to 2024 cycle now, but you kind of see, I think, some of the juice of what they have from this season kind of translate over to legit like momentum, not fake momentum, real legitimate momentum on the recruiting trail. Speaking of transfer portal, let's talk the transfer portal giveth, the transfer portal taketh. Malik McClain entered the transfer portal today. Funny story, we'd report on Noles 24/7 that he was someone, we don't like to put out a ton of names unless we feel decent about it, because players are, I think, evaluating their options quite a bit. But this is one we felt decent about putting out there, that there was something to it. I think the indication was that he was coming back, and then that changed, and he wanted to weigh his options, and that ended up happening a couple of weeks later. He entered the transfer portal today. It's a guy who's had a couple hundred receiving yards each of the last 2 seasons, was a 4-star recruit, someone who's in the rotation, but his playing time did decrease this year. He went from a full-time starter to a part-time starter. And so anyways, we had the story in the system, but I didn't know we had a story in the system. I forgot I'd actually written it like 2 weeks ago, and I made Brett and Zach write something before realizing. Brett, how far along were you in writing something when I demanded you to get a show going while I was getting up from my nap?
Zach was already doing it, I thought.
I was confused. It was
you
my
were
fault.
like demanding all the wrong people, pretty much.
Yeah, I had it all done. No, I actually did. I think I had like the title done, but I went into like the little article thing and see if Brendan had written anything, because I know his old mind, kind of leaves him a lapse sometimes. So
it wanders. Wanders.
But it was good that we had something. But yeah, hey, good on you for, obviously not a situation that we'd like to see, right? We don't want any starting caliber guy to depart the program, but I think we warned FSU fans kind of beforehand that he was the guy that was at least thinking about exploring his options.
This is an interesting one where there's I feel like a fairly sizable disconnect between us covering the team and being there daily versus I think that I don't want to say the casual fan, like just the pretty like avid fan who watches games and is on the message board. I don't know what the disconnect is, but like I think it's because Dane, myself, all of us have a man crush on Darian Williamson, and we've seen what Kentron Poitier can do. I would much rather have Malik McClain, but I'll be totally honest. Like when we had heard about this being a possibility, I was kind of thinking it was a good thing to open up. I'd rather have Malik McClain, but I think there's some positive silver linings, maybe what I should say, to allow Darian Williamson, Kentron Poitier, and maybe like a Hakeem Williams to have more at-bats this season. I think there's something to that. I'm not sure if you guys feel similarly, but that was kind of my first inclination. We started hearing rumblings in Malik McClain, disgruntlement, just wanting to look elsewhere potentially for a more stabilized role.
Yeah. I don't know. I think Malik McClain could go be in a better system. From what I've seen, like his game is a little bit limited. Like he's good at being a threat downfield, right? Like
straightforward is what he does. Yeah.
The lateral stuff, I would prefer some of the other guys like a Darian Williamson or a Kentron Poitier. And then obviously you got some talented slots like a Micah Pittman returning, and then Winston Wright, who's a guy that we didn't get to see in 2022, who I'm really excited to see if he can get back up to full health like he was at West Virginia. I mean, he was billed as your top receiver transfer coming in last year, and you didn't even get to use him. And that was one of the best groups on the team, the receiver core. So yeah, to me, it's like Malik McClain made some clutch catches. He was a guy you could typically count on to come down with a big time play, but wasn't a guy that was breaking games open like a Johnny Wilson. And I think this could benefit both sides. I don't think they're this could be a situation where both sides aren't the loser. They could both win. Florida State could go get some more playing time for a guy like Darian, like you said, and then maybe put Hakeem into more of a star role early on in his career, whereas Malik McClain can go find a fit where he can be a receiver 1 or 2 elsewhere, because I think he only started like 3 games in 2022, and that was a huge drop off from his true freshman season where he started, I believe, 11 games. So I think both sides could win here.
I just think it also shows how big of a change there was in that room last season in the portal, because I think McClain at the end of last season was probably wide receiver 1 before all that portaling happens, and now the next season he's entering the portal because he's not able to get enough reps himself. So just the entire change that Ruben over the last year.
Yeah, when it paints a picture of what FSU has done in the transfer portal last year and just how much the depth changed almost overnight, and then what you've brought in with some of the younger players and some of the development. This is going to be a theme as we get into the offensive breakdown portion of this podcast, and that's that FSU finds a weakness, they identify it, and they don't allow it to fester for multiple years. I think that is the takeaway if we're looking at the wide receiver position and kind of the big picture of the Malik McClain departure. And we're going to see that trend repeat itself over and over again in the next 30 minutes or so here. So let's get into the offensive breakdown for 2023, fellas. It is going to be, in my opinion, a stacked offense. We're looking at an offense that was top 10 nationally in yards per play. That was top 20 nationally in points per game. It was both top 10 nationally in yards per rush and yards per pass, so super balanced. Efficiency, top 15 nationally. Jordan Travis, quarterback 1, was legitimately quarterback 1 for PFF. He was number 1 rated quarterback in the PFF overall grade in the Power 5 level. And most of it's coming back. You bring back Trey Benson, you bring back Johnny Wilson. We're going to get into all this. You bring back most of your firepower from this past year. What, Dane, would you say that Florida State did well this past season? Like, if you had to say this was their identity, this is what they did at a high level, and they can really, like, this was their bread and butter. What would you say it was in 2022 as we do a little reflective?
I think it's almost hard to say because they were so balanced, which might be the correct answer there. Yeah. They were so balanced, and they were so good at both running the ball and passing the ball, and they were so explosive in both of those too. I mean, were they the most explosive team in the entire country? I think they were.
I could pull up their. They have to be in the top 5. Let me pull up their.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean that probably starts with Jordan Travis because.
Sorry, Dane. Georgia beat them with 98 because of TCU just shit in the bed. 98 plays of 20 plus yards. Florida State had 97.
Okay, and they had a full extra
game.
Had 2 extra games actually. Yeah. But yeah, the balance they have there, and that's probably true because of Jordan Travis and him being so versatile and being so dynamic. But it's hard to say exactly what they did so well because they were so balanced, and I think that's its own answer.
Brett, coming to you unfairly, what did FSU suck at this past season on offense?
I don't think they really sucked at anything, but besides maybe just in the red zone execution, especially earlier in the season when they struggled like at NC State and other games in that 3-game stretch. And, obviously there's just some blunders early in the, I think, what other games? LSU, the red zone plays and the
toss play.
Yeah. And that first half of Georgia Tech too, I think was some pretty bad red zone play. So I think if there was one glaring weakness, it'd have to be that.
It's funny. The red zone offense, it was atrocious in the first half of the year. It was one of the worst in the country. And it didn't make sense because they were pretty good at it. The first 2 years under Mike Norvell, especially the year before, they ended up finishing 60th nationally. I'd be interested in going back and doing some splits on what they were in the back half of the year. Zach, remember how much they started practicing in the red zone in the back half of the season? Again, they saw an issue. That time they would usually allocate to like a tempo drill or something like that at the start of practice when they went good on good. Started spending a ton of time in the red zone, and it seemed to pay off.
Yeah. No, I mean, we've seen them do that a lot, right? If they're struggling with something offensively or defensively, they're gonna test their guys in practice, which is what you'd hope any good coach is doing. But yeah, I agree with Brett. I think one of the biggest weaknesses was red zone play, and I think a lot of the stuff they were doing offensively, the plays that would go negative, some of that stuff was blocking up front by the O-line or lack thereof. And I think some of that was kind of lackluster tight end play at some points, especially in the blocking game. So, you hope bringing in guys like, we'll talk about them later, Kyle Morlock and Jaheim Bell will help alleviate that problem a little bit.
Okay, let's get into the position-by-position breakdown as we look what FSU has coming back and what the roster will look like in 2023. We're going to start at quarterback. Before we do every single position group, each segment, we will play a little buy or Sonone at the end. Guys, who presents by our Sonone?
The Turner Group.
The Turner Group.
The Turner
Dave,
Group.
Show it to him. Yeah, he got
He
on
did
the
it.
first one. Let's go. We want to thank Colin and Amy Turner of the Turner Group, a real estate company in Central Florida. Colin is doing some work right now. He's helping some people find some apartments. And guess what? It's not just in Central Florida. Yes, that's where they're based out of, but they can help you find a home in Tallahassee. If you're a parent whose student is enrolled at FSU and struggling to find like permanent residency, let Colin know. He can help you find out. He's got a wide array of sources who can help out. Give him a call.
We need to hire him.
He's connected. We have. Well, anyways, 407-403-8546, or you can email Colin at getstarted@theturnergroup.com. Also, Colin, I need to send you some rye because I got a sample set for you that I think you'll enjoy. So sorry, Colin. All right, let's get into it. Position by position breakdown on offense. Quarterback. It starts with J-Trav, fellas, right? Like that's the straw that stirs the drink. Do straws really stir drinks anymore? They're disposable. I don't know. Like my drink, no straw.
What if it's a paper straw?
I hate paper straws. Sea turtles are just gonna have to deal. No, that's probably not correct.
That's
Sorry.
really
I agree with you,
offensive.
Brendan. You can
What?
stand on
Yes. Let's start an anti-sea turtle movement right now. Let's go.
We're gonna get canceled.
it. I'm like 80% joking, but yeah.
I mean, they need to find something better than that. The metal straws or the steel straws, a little bit better. The paper
Reusable,
ones,
yeah.
I have no use for those at all. No. And the sea turtles, if we can find a compromise with the reusable straws, I think we'll be okay.
All right, Jordan
but-
Travis.
Jordan Travis, quarterback one. Yeah, he had a remarkable season for the Seminoles. Someone that I think all four of us were at practice. We all see similar things. I don't think we disagree a ton on anything. So some of this is going to be bad podcasting that we all have kind of a similar view of what we're seeing. But sometimes that could be a good thing if you're all kind of checking the boxes, Chris Neism. If you're all seeing the same thing. So I'm trying to find Jordan Travis's stats from this past year. We all saw Jordan Travis look good in camp. And we saw the offense starting to get tailored to his skill set in a way that felt really good in the preseason. But you never know like what kind of jump someone's going to make or just how much progress they're going to have, like if it's going to carry over onto Saturdays. And for Jordan Travis, it did. He completed 64% of his passes for 3,214 yards. He had 24 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. That's good for a passer rating of 160.11, which was 14th nationally. His yard per attempt average was 9.1. He was one of the most explosive passers through the air this past year while keeping the ball safe with only 5 interceptions. So he did a lot well. Brett, I'll start off with you because you were at a ton of preseason practices, got to see Jordan Travis from the beginning to where he is now. I guess what stood out to you the most about his growth, I guess over the last couple years, but especially this past year, I guess what stood out?
I think the thing that stands out the most improvement-wise is maybe the deep ball, just the way he's able to basically put it wherever he wants. Most of the season, there weren't that many that he missed, it seems like. I mean, the one to Johnny that Johnny makes the great catch on against Oklahoma, I mean, it couldn't be in any better of a spot. But also just the way he manages the offense and gets them into right spots a lot of the time. I think the coaches talk about it a lot, just the checks he makes at the line and the way he's developed into that kind of game manager and being able to get, everyone around him in the right positions at the right time, I think has been huge for this offense.
We got to talk about JTrav for Heisman.com. Everyone wanted to make fun of me when I was calling him JTrav 2.5 years ago. We actually had someone cancel their Knowles 24/7 subscription because I was writing about quote unquote JTrav too much. I forget your username. If you are listening to this, I hope you feel like an idiot right now. I hope you're just ashamed of yourself and how big of a baby you are. Look me in the eyes.
He's staring at like the red dot on his laptop saying that. That's so funny.
It's actually a green dot. Also
Green
when someone
dot.
says, look at me in the eyes, you can only look at one eye at once. You can't look at 2 eyes at once. It's impossible to do. It's difficult. But what do we think, fellas? I'm going to throw this to Dane. What do we think like this is the next step for Jordan Travis? He's coming back. He is getting some preseason, off-season Heisman buzz. What are we looking for him to like take the next step? Like what does his evolution look like to you? What can it be?
It's hard to say because he I mean, his physical ceiling is somewhat limited from like his arm strength and that sort of thing, and he was just so good. But I think when he struggled was maybe his composure at certain parts of the year, and you could probably say that did improve over the year too, like in the Florida game, and he did stay composed, and he wasn't playing upset to the point where it affected him, like maybe we saw in the NC State game or something. But if there's anywhere, I guess it'd be there. But I think it's a point to be said too that I don't know how much he really can grow if he plays as well as he did this year, and he did that again with a better team around him, more talent around him, like the tight end position that of course we'll talk about. Then in another year of guys around him getting better, maybe a better offensive line even, then maybe he can win the Heisman or something just off of that. But it's hard to say he can get, or he will be better than he is, or where he would even be better.
My thing is, how can we cap what Jordan Travis can accomplish?
It's a good question.
Look what we've seen already. This dude, I'm sorry, J. Trav, but he could not throw a football into the wind.
It was
2 years ago.
It was a thing.
And he's a Heisman preseason Heisman candidate now. Like, what do we like? This dude like could surprise all of us, like he's already done, and go and take his game to another level. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I don't think we should cap what Jordan Travis can accomplish.
You know what I think gets him to another level, Zach, is, and Dane touched on this point, but like I think at the end of 2021. I don't know if he was markedly better this past season than he was at the end of 2021. He was better, don't get me wrong. But like he made his big stride. He made a huge stride from 2019 to 2020, and then a huge stride from even early on in 2021 to the end of it. I think what really helped him out was the better supporting cast. Like I think that helped make his statistics just that much better, helped him calm down a little bit, him feel like he didn't have to force things sometimes. And so now the next step, I think part of that, in addition to what Dane mentioned, is like the supporting cast elevating with them. And we're going to get to that. Like everyone coming back pretty much with the transfer portal additions we've had. That is the next step, is to support him with a legitimate championship caliber cast. Like I think that's what we see next, is if you can give him weapons all over the place and you give him good options, 2 or 3 every single play, instead of just having maybe one, depending on what the coverage dictates, or giving him more time, that kind of stuff. That's the next step that I think they're going to get there. Do we want to talk about the depth at quarterback? Like we all really like Jordan Travis. I don't think we have to spend a lot of time. Like he is the offense. He stayed healthy this year though, outside of the Louisville game, and we'll get to Tate Rodemaker in a second here. Like he stayed healthy, and that was huge. Like he eliminated taking a lot of hits. He got rid of the ball. The sack rate for Florida State went from like 8, almost 9% of dropbacks 2 seasons ago to this past season to like 4.5. Like it got cut in half. And the offensive line was better, but Jordan Travis was better at getting rid of the football. So he stopped taking less hits, wasn't running as much, even as like a design runner unless he had to. So you only lose him for 1 game, which is going to be huge. He has to be available for you to get where you want to be in 2023. But how about Tate Rodemaker? Like, what do we think? I will throw this to, I don't know, who wants to talk about Tate Rodemaker and his progress that we saw? And no one really wants to. I can tell Brett's smirking already. Who wants to talk about Tate Rodemaker?
Brett's chomping at the bit.
I don't know if he is. He's shaking his head. Brett's out on this. Brett's out.
I got
it. We need Kev to pop up the Heisman photo.
We do need Kev to pop up. That's a cringy Heisman photo. It's unsettling. Zach, you got this. So let's talk about like what Tate Rodemaker, whether that game last year is a potential like jumping off point, a propelling point for this upcoming season. Like, do we bank on Tate Rodemaker if you have to play him for 2 or 3 games this season? Do we think he can win you those games?
I think it depends on who, first of all.
Okay, yeah,
right.
Fair.
If you're playing him against Clemson or LSU, maybe not. If it's against Virginia Tech and Miami, no, I'm kidding. But I think Tate, in my eyes, I'm more comfortable going into this year. If he has to start a game or 2 or 3, right? If J. Trav goes down, and God forbid he doesn't, but if that happens, I think at least I'm a little bit more comfortable after seeing what he did in the Louisville game, right? Tate's not perfect. He's not an elite quarterback, but he's a guy that we've seen in practice improve. He's not someone that, has stayed on the same trajectory throughout his entire career. When he first got into the program, was not, a guy that impressed much in practice to us, but has kind of steadily built his game up a little bit, has understood the offense more, which I think has helped. And then, like we talked about before, there's a better supporting cast at the, especially in the receiver room. So he's a guy that I think, at least for me, I'm a little bit more comfortable with him, maybe stepping in for a few games if needed. I guess, either you guys, what are your thoughts on kind of just Tate's ascension and where you think his game is at and what the kind of drop off would be if, any, obviously there would be, but the drop off from, J-Trav to Tate if he was needed to step in the 2023 season.
Yeah, I mean, the drop off is really big because Jordan Travis is really a fantastic college quarterback, but Tate Rodemaker is not, he's not this incompetent guy who can't get it done and do what's needed. I think, like you said, the supporting cast around him, that's something we keep mentioning, but that improving really should improve him too. And outside of the players around him, like having Mike Norvell as your coach and in your ear, the game plans he puts together, I think that helps him too. Like I trust, you can say you trust Tate Rodemaker in a pinch, but I trust Mike Norvell in a pinch as well to give Tate Rodemaker a game plan, to succeed. And that's really important. That's like equally as important as anything. He's not Mike Norvell is not a stubborn head coach that is going to stick to exactly what he's been doing. He will adapt to Tate's strengths when he needs to, and I trust that.
I was just going to add to your point about the supporting cast and just that you don't live and die by Jordan now. Like this offense just used to be on Jordan's escapability and him prolonging plays for the offense and the wide receivers to get open. And now I think you don't live and die by Jordan's his dynamic play. Like you have other people you can hand the ball off to, throw it to if he goes out of the game, and you feel like you'll be comfortable with that.
All right, guys. What'd I miss?
Let's move on to kind of talking about, maybe some of the other depth pieces in the quarterback room.
Ooh, I got it. Let's do a little buy or Sonome. Brock Glenn starts more games in his FSU career, good typing there, Brendan, than Tate Rodemaker and AJ Duffy combined. So buy or Sonome, Brock Glenn, more starts than Rodemaker and Duffy combined.
Combined?
Mm-hmm.
So no.
Is the implication there that everyone would say yes if you just said AJ Duffy?
I don't know. I didn't think that deeply about it, Dane.
Oh.
Answer the question, Dane.
Well, if Jordan Travis gets hurt, I feel like Jordan Travis's health here is a big and it's very influential to this question. But I think I want to say bye. I like Brock Glenn a lot.
Whoa.
Ooh, I do too. I had a dream about him the other night.
Okay.
Okay.
We were at tour duty, and he was slinging the ball around. And
he was all sweaty.
I'm gonna buy.
No!
I'm gonna buy.
Wow, you guys, that's a crazy buy, no? Brock Glenn's going to start more games than Tate Rodemaker and AJ Duffy combined.
Back it up. We'll try to follow Dane's logic here. So Tate Rodemaker has one start in his career, right? It was 2 years ago against Jacksonville State. It was somehow not the worst Jacksonville State game that Florida State. I think this is more of an indictment of what we're talking about. The fact that this is even in consideration, more of an indictment of our lack of confidence in AJ Duffy right now. Is that fair? I'm not trying to say we're off of him totally, that there's no chance, but the fact that he went through the season and did not show a sign of enough glimmers of he might be the guy to leave it open for the next guy. I think that's what this is. I think that's what we're all kind of dancing around here. I think that's why I'm also buying Brock Glenn having a chance to start 6 games in his career. So I don't know if the other two get that or not.
Yeah, I think we thought AJ Duffy would be further along in his development, seemingly to our, moderately untrained eyes, than I can't remember what I just said, but yeah, we thought he'd be further along. I think
That was a good point you were making, Dane.
Yeah,
I liked it. Okay, so
no, I want to say I agree with that. Like, I think if you're gonna say that this is more of us talking specifically about Duffy and his development, the one thing I want to note is, like, I've harped on Duffy's game, a good amount, like during practices, and just wanted to see him step up a little bit more. Right, if there's guys maybe not participating in practice ahead of him on the depth chart, we didn't really see him take advantage of those opportunities. So I think that's kind of something I wanted to see more out of him. But I think if we've learned anything about Mike Norvell and his quarterbacks, it's to not count any of them out for a massive improvement in their game over their career. And AJ Duffy's a true freshman. So let's see what he does in spring and beyond, and see if his game has improved. And I think there's a good chance that at the very least we're going to see some improvement, in the spring, and then as we head into the offseason and preseason camp.
Okay, let's move on to running back. I think we have a pretty good grasp on what quarterback one looks like. We are excited to see how the younger guys develop in the spring. I think that'll be fun. And you have 4 quarterbacks on scholarship, which is also nice. So let's go to running back. To bring back some really important pieces, we're going to start with Trey Benson. But I guess before we get into what you have coming back, let's talk about what you leave, and that is Treshaun Ward. He was the ACC's leader in yards per carry this past year, someone who's been a just really solid option each of the last 2 years for the Seminoles. So everyone likes him. Coaches, players, fans, obviously. Like, he is well-regarded, well-liked. FSU kind of taking a gamble here. They basically could not assure Treshaun Ward that they can give him the usage of about 15 or so carries or touches a game, closer to 10. I know that doesn't sound like a huge discrepancy, but throughout the course of a season, like that does add up. And basically that's the difference in Mike Norvell's system between being running back 1 versus running back 2 or even 3, based on how balanced he likes to be. Dane, I'll start with you, man. Like, is this a gamble to let Treshaun Ward walk, given what we know about his game and I guess his consistency?
he is a really good player, and I think he's a unique player. He offers a physical ability in his lateral movement and his patience and vision, that sort of thing, especially in like a counter scheme that you might not have elsewhere. But I think it's hard to say that too, because your running back room is so deep, and it's also, I mean, it's a running back in Mike Norvell's offense. You don't have to find a special player to succeed in that. But you do have Trey Benson, who is, such a good player in his own right. And you have these guys behind him, a lot of fans won't give him the respect he, I think, deserves yet, because he hasn't proven it on the field. But a guy like Rodney Hill, who I think is fantastic. He's a really good player, and people will see that this upcoming year. It's not worth it. I can understand why they wouldn't think keeping Treshaun is like a dire need, because of how deep your room is and how much younger talent you have, that you don't want to let go of that either, like a Rodney Hill.
So when you take a step back, and I do want to spend some time on Rodney Hill, because I think we're going to battle like who the president of the Rodney Hill fan club is. I think there's 3 or 4 of us who will take a swing to see who gets to be the president of that. But we'll start at the top, and this is why I think the gamble you take, why you end up making it, and that is Trey Benson. He was 10 yards shy of 1,000 yards. What he did in the back stretch of the season was remarkable. He had 100 yards in almost, 5 games in a row. He was fantastic. And what he did from a physicality standpoint, like once he got ahead of steam, was also exceptional. He averaged a little bit more than 6 yards per carry, but he broke a tackle, according to PFF. He basically broke a tackle on like every 2 of his carries. Like half the time he was breaking the tackle. A lot of the times that was multiple tackles he was breaking on one run. I mean, he has so much juice to him as a runner. Brett, I'll throw this to you. Like, as we got to see Trey Benson evolve throughout the course of the season, what was his peak? Like, what was at his best? What was he as a force, as like a consistent weapon for FSU's offense? How would you describe his game?
Just someone that can completely put an offense on its back. Even when a defensive line has a bunch of guys in the backfield, Trey Benson's still going to turn those runs into possible explosive plays. Like there's not many other college running backs that you can say that about. And I mean, just from preseason, I think we all kind of saw the explosiveness and how he can turn one little hole into, a 60-yard run just off the way he's able to cut and go down the field. And I just think the peak of the season for him was that 5-game stretch you mentioned when Trey was out. And I think that was probably the time that the coaching staff realized, if Trey was to leave next year, we'd be okay with Benson as our number one guy all season and carrying the load from here on out.
With Trey Benson, I think I wasn't sure if Zach was going to talk or not. Sorry, Zach, that's my fault. Because I was pointing at hit the like button and you hit the thumbs up, and I thought you meant like I was going to go, but I got it now.
The like button.
I get it. Moving it along here. With Trey Benson, this has been such an amazing offseason with retention. It feels it was, I guess, a month ago when Trey Benson said he was coming. The Turner Group. It was a month ago when Trey Benson said he was coming back, but it feels like an eternity ago because he was one of the first dominoes to fall. It's been such a great offseason with retention. The Battle's End, shout out to them because they are doing a phenomenal job there, and what I think is a sliver of value of being able to find some value in the margins there. But Zach, so talk about the running back room. Trey Benson highlights it. You know what you have with him. I think it's going to be interesting to see if he can really put the offense on his back consistently. Like Brett said, he did it for games at a time. Can he do it for an entire season? But what does the rest of the running back room look like to you? And I guess what are the complementary pieces to Trey Benson's game?
Yeah, so if you look at the rest of that room, right, there's a lot of unproven talent. But I think, when you're talking about a gamble, right, I think that's what you're talking about the most is there's a lot of guys in that room that, the staff, us that get to watch the practices every day during the fall, think very highly of, but have not proven much on the field yet. But if you look at a guy like CJ Campbell, who I think kind of gets overlooked a little bit, every time he came to the game as a reserve guy towards the latter portion of the season, because they were blowing those teams out, he was, marching it down the field with Tate Rodemaker and AJ Duffy and going and scoring touchdowns, right? And that's, if Rodney Hill was the guy that that the staff wasn't trying to redshirt, that would have been him in that position because he is probably ahead of CJ Campbell on the depth chart. I think we all believe that. And then you have a guy like Keziah Holmes, who is, I think, even a little bit more of a mystery because he was, a late addition from Penn State, a guy that kind of, at least at the very beginning of his FSU career, walked on to the team before the 2022 season, kind of was a late addition in fall camp. And then we got to see him kind of progress as a scout team guy for FSU this past year. So excited to see kind of what they can maybe unlock with his game. I know out of high school, he was a really versatile athlete, guy that could catch balls out of the backfield. He's definitely bulked up more since high school. He was more of a slender, taller back out of high school, but he went to Penn State and kind of put on some weight. I think he put on some bad weight at Penn State, but I think he's kind of shed off a lot of that bad weight since he's come to FSU. And I think, there's a good rotation behind Trey Benson. But I think the main thing is that they're unproven. But I think this offseason is going to be huge for those guys as they get more reps in practice and spring ball, and then obviously work with the team in offseason, conditioning this month, and then moving into, the summer conditioning and preseason camp. So, yeah, I'm excited about it. I think a lot of people are going to be happy about Rodney Hill. And just, how impressive he looks. I am the president of that club. I met him first before all of you guys, covered his recruitment. Actually was the person that.
Oh, Zach got muted there. I didn't like the way that was going. I didn't like the way that was going at all. Dane, would you rather be the president of the Rodney Hill fan club or the Darian Williamson fan club? A reminder, Zach, that you are this is live, so you do have the Chris Parson screensaver. It's no longer just
that's
us.
my fan club. I think Rodney Hill is going to be more productive next year, but I think it'd be more fun to see him the member of the stock is much lower on Darian Williamson, and I'm willing to put just as much in. I'll say that.
Okay,
so I guess I'm all Darian on.
We'll do like an individual player draft, like not like a team draft, but like we'll do fan club draft at some point in the off season.
I need people to understand how good Darion Williamson is. I need it to happen.
I thought I was high on him and maybe a tad hyperbolic at times. I've never done that, Wyatt Rector. And then Dane started comparing him to Justin Jefferson in practice. Like, all right, man, I'm out. You got me. All right, let's talk about.
He's a 6'3" slot receiver with
let's go back. Sorry, I need to keep us on track.
Physical ability.
The defensive segment that we do tomorrow with the X's and O's guys and Chris Nee is going to be so much more on pace than what we're doing with me here leading the ship. Brett's laughing because he knows it's absolutely true. What do we like, fellas, about Rodney Hill's game? We're all super high on him. He is probably the replacement to Trayshawn Ward. We know what Trey Benson is. We know what Lawrence Toafili is going to be as his gadget player. What does Rodney Hill do well? Why are we so excited about him? Whoever wants to take the floor. Not everyone at once. Dane, you go.
Man, this is going to be awesome for our podcast crowd.
Well, they're used to it.
Rodney Hill, his burst is probably. I was going to say probably the best in the roster, but Trey Benson's pretty exceptional burst too, at least for his size. But Rodney Hill's burst is really incredible. I think it's hard to see how good someone's vision is like on tape, but he's a guy that you can kind of see it on, like in high school, that felt like one of his strong points, or his strengths is the word I'm looking for. And yeah, like Brendan was talking about, his tackle breaking ability, like for his size as just a freshman, he came in as, what did he come in at when he enrolled? Like 174 pounds or something. And by the end of the year, he looks like a guy with, huge legs and great tackling ability or tackle breaking ability. And he definitely didn't lose a step in that burst. So
you two down there, Dane and Zach, when one of the other one screws up, the joy that the other one takes in it.
I wasn't actually laughing about that.
Okay, be nice to each other.
Yeah,
Dane's made me feel bad, not Zach.
Oh, me?
Yeah, no, never mind. Well, go ahead.
I like that Rodney Hill. To Dane's point about him bulking up a little bit, his contact balance for a quote unquote smaller guy. Like, I think that's actually really surprising and really pleasant, and like makes me think that he will be a dude in a couple of years. And this is how I've described it on the message board. Like, the people that are upset about Trayshawn Ward leaving, like, I get it. Like, I really like Trayshawn. We all like Trayshawn Ward. We feel like we qualify this all the time. We all like Trayshawn Ward. You have him for probably one more season. He's a redshirt sophomore. He'll be a redshirt junior, but with the COVID year, he's going to be a fifth-year player next year. You have him for one more year if he were to stay at Florida State. If he were to stay at Florida State, the carries for Rodney Hill would be minimal, much like they were this year probably, and there's a decent chance Rodney Hill transfers out. To me, I'm doing the math of would I rather have Rodney Hill for 2 more seasons, 3 more seasons, or Trayshawn Ward for 1? That is a gamble. We've talked about gambling a few times on this show. That's kind of what you're balancing at this point with the roster. It's gotten to the point where you're taking calculated risks at different position groups in a good way, in a way that like you feel like you have decent options in your backups. Your younger players might be ready to jump the veterans. That wasn't always the case. So that's what we got with the running back room. Before we move on there, Buy or Sonone, sponsored by
the Turner Group.
The Turner Group. Buy or Sonone running back room, Keziah Holmes. Brett, I'll start with you. We buying, we Sonone, Keziah Holmes hype.
Sonone.
Dane?
Not enough reps.
What is the bar we're setting?
The fan base on the message board's obsession with him.
Yeah, no, Sonone. We can calm down a little bit. But, maybe a really good ceiling there. I think he looks the part. So there's that. But it's not like he was like some unbelievable get out of the portal or something. You can chill out a little bit.
Keep going down. Get Dane muted.
Yeah, I mean, the obsession is a little crazy. But I think that happens with pretty much any hyped player that's kind of behind the scenes and is not really seen much on game days, right? They're like, oh, this guy might be a dude. I mean, we get to see him. He's not, breaking open the defense every play, but he has some promise to him, but also known the crazy hype over him. I think he's a guy that can maybe contribute for you down the line, but I wouldn't expect him to be a dude in 2023 at this point.
Make it a Sonone all around. To tap the brakes a little bit on Keziah Holmes, at least as an immediate impact player, someone who factors into rotation. Maybe over time, we will see. Let's talk about the tight end group, one that we've alluded to a few times here because it is going to, as the kids would say, a glow up, right? Is that right, young fellas? Glow up?
Just
keep
move
it
on.
moving.
Thank God.
Dave, let's talk about the 2 transfers that FSU's brought in. That's why we're excited about this group. Jaheim Bell, Kyle Morlock, both 4-star recruits. Jaheim Bell is one of the top skill players in the transfer portal. They get a 94 grade.
Yeah, he's 8 overall.
So he's top 10. Kyle Morlock not super far behind, I think, with a 91 or 92 grade off the top of my head, and he's coming up from the Division II level, so a little different, right? Jaheim Bell was a baller in the SEC at FSU's filter feeder program up in South Carolina. Kyle Morlock D2, so 2 different trajectories. Both guys they want to use this year. Can you evaluate their games, what they do similarly, and maybe what they do differently? What stands out to you in watching them?
I think they both have a ton of upside. I think they're very different players, which is a good thing in taking 2 tight ends from the portal. Kyle Morlock is more of a guy with obvious NFL upside as like a true tight end, being 6'7", 245, whatever he is, and having the physical ability that he has. He's not. I think there is a bit of a misconception with some people thinking that like Jaheim Bell is this great receiving tight end and Kyle Morlock is just more of the blocker. But Kyle Morlock can has so much receiving capability too. You know, he is more of an NFL tight end prospect than Jaheim Bell is. So the sky is the limit for him. I think he runs so well, moves so well in open space. I want to say his ball skills are good, but his fluidity as an athlete at 6'7" is really impressive, and that's understated, I think. And then Jaheim Bell, dang it. Okay, but Jaheim Bell is more of the receiving guy because I think Jaheim Bell is more one-dimensional than Kyle Morlock, but that's not necessarily bad because Jaheim Bell is an elite receiving tight end at the college level. I got to stop looking at Brendan.
Well, it's just I know what you mean by saying Jaheim Bell's more one-dimensional, but at the same time, he might be the most versatile player in the roster too. So,
and I'm getting to that. From a matchup standpoint, in the receiving game, I think he's people say matchup nightmare. He is absolutely that. As a tight end, getting matched up on linebackers, he has way too much athletic capability to be put, for a team to put a linebacker on him, and then you can line him out wide like South Carolina did at times, and on a corner, I feel like at the college level, he kind of reminds me of like an AJ Brown or something, like just someone who just physically outmatches the person, and the guy lining up on him, and he's a bit unguardable in that sense. I don't know if I'm overselling it, but I think he's.
I mean, the AJ Brown comp was rich, but I think your point's well taken, Dave.
Kind of what AJ Brown does, though. He can just physically outmatch corners, even though he's not just much bigger, much taller than them. Like, what's Jaheim Bell? 6'3", listed 6'3", 6'2.5", and but he does physically outmatch people.
Dane is exhibiting excitement, which I think is like that. We all feel it's like, I'm not teasing you, Dave. Like, I feel like we all feel like excitement of like when you start daydreaming of like what those 2 tight ends can do on the field at the same time. We know Mike Norvell likes to use 2 tight ends quite a bit, and they both present, as Dane said, matchup nightmares. Oh, hey, here we go. What's scarier, a matchup nightmare or a matchup monster? A mismatch monster or a matchup nightmare? What's scarier?
Matchup nightmare.
Matchup nightmare. I mean, that's fear, Right. Fear is fear.
Mismatch monster kind of sounds lame.
Well, I won't use that in my writing.
That sounds like a cereal. That sounds like a cereal or something.
No, use mismatch monster. That's a little bit more original. But yeah, it does sound like it's mismatch monster and Count Chocula or something.
I hate you guys. So those are the 2 additions that have us all really excited about like the creativity that shotgun that beer, Dave. That the creativity that Mike Norvell can kind of implement on offense. But Brett, what else is coming back at tight end? Because I think finally you're starting to see the numbers at tight end kind of like, it doesn't feel like overkill anymore. It feels like everyone is slotted correctly, and to me that's encouraging.
Yeah, obviously on the depth chart, you have Marquise coming back, big body that can also, score some touchdowns for you. They showed it late in the season, and in the Oklahoma game, and he also showed some soft hands earlier in the year, just with some one-handed catches. But also Brian Courtney coming back just brings a different athletic dynamic to that room. I think at least this past year in practices, I always thought that out of the tight ends athletically, he stood out by far from all the rest of those guys, and in the way he could move and the fluidity that he moved with on the field.
Dane, in the chat, people are asking for you to show your feet. This is going off the rails quickly. I think we need to hurry this one along. Wow. I agree with everything that Brett said, but in the interest of moving around, Buyer Sonome presented by
The Turner Group.
All right.
The Turner Group.
The Turner Group. Buyer Sonome. The tight end. The tight end overhaul was a bigger single season overhaul than wide receiver last year.
Bye.
Making you guys think. Oh, Dane with the bye.
It's
how are you?
Well, I'm going to do that, bro.
How are you defining it?
Well, I was gonna say that it's harder to flip a wide receiver room because you need more players, and so it's like easier to flip a tight end room, especially with how bad Florida State's was. But you pulled two fantastic tight end out of the portal, and that room is completely flipped. I mean, you have two totally different types of players that you brought in, both with more physical capability and a higher ceiling than the guys you already have in that room, and a higher floor, everything. I mean, those two guys are both very good players for you, or at least good contributors, above average ACC tight ends, and you didn't have that before.
I'm with Dane. I think it's a buy. And we know what the wide receiver room turned into last year and how low of a floor it was, but like, people were talking about the tight end room being the worst position group on the roster this year. I think FSU maximized it as well as possible. But still, like this was a position group that you had to be very creative with in kind of like highlighting strengths and hiding weaknesses. You're really not hiding anything moving forward in 2023. Oh, Zach's waving the finger. Zach disagrees.
Brett, you go first.
I would Sonome this because I don't know how you're defining bigger. But I think value-wise, like that wide receiver room flip made a way bigger difference. Like if the tight end room was flipped last year and the wide receiver room wasn't, like it wouldn't have made the same difference on the offense. Getting the wide receivers that they got this year completely changed the way they were able to open up the offense.
Dude, our podcast crowd hates us. All right. Yeah, I agree with Brett, right? I think the bigger impact is like, if you can flip an entire receiver room to becoming it was literally the worst part of your team in 2021, I think, to becoming maybe your top 1, 2, 3 strengths in 2022. I think that was huge. I'm Sononing that all the way, even though I really like what they did in flipping the tight end room. And also, we don't know. I think, we know pretty well what Jaheim Bell is going to be. We don't know exactly how Mike Norvell is going to utilize him in the offense, but Kyle Morlock's making a step up from Division II football to Power 5, big time football. So I think there'll be a little acclimation process with him, and he's a guy that has multiple years to play at FSU. So even if he doesn't make a massive impact in year one, he could be a guy that you could be more excited about in years to come. So yeah, I'm Sononing that. I think the receiver haul was just way more impressive.
Somehow there's still 250 people watching this, so they've been watching it consistently.
God bless you guys.
What's wrong with you guys?
There's something else. There's something else I want to say on that too. But
good.
But I mean, we haven't seen this tight end room. We haven't seen it play out. Like if we said this last offseason, if we just saw what the guys they pulled in, Micah Pittman, Winston Wright, that kind of, I don't know if that doesn't count or what. There's an asterisk there, and Johnny Wilson and Deuce Spann. If we saw that before the season versus what we have now before this upcoming 2023 season, I think the obvious answer would be this tight end room, but that room overperformed expectations so much. And so it's hard to answer that question, but I think from a recruiting standpoint, you have to say that this tight end haul was far more impressive.
That's a perfect transition to the next position group we're going to get to, and that is the wide receivers. It was one, I think, Dan, you summed it up perfectly, that it overachieved expectations. And by the time preseason camp rolled around and we were like a week or two into it, the light bulb kind of turned on for Johnny Wilson. Things started to click, and he started to look like the part of a wide receiver one with some days of drops, right? And that's kind of what his season ended up turning into, where he had these flashes of brilliance. He had, 43 catches for 897 yards. That's a whopping 20.86 yards per carry. That's among the national leaders. 5 touchdowns in some dominant games, especially Louisville and Oklahoma come to mind. So he ends up being your wide receiver one, something that this offense was certainly missing the last couple of years. If you get Johnny Wilson back, that was announced with the Battle's End. He's coming back. Micah Pittman as well, who is a rock solid transfer wide receiver, really helped out with the punt return game, add stability there, and kind of a gadgety player, did a lot of things well, including blocking on the perimeter. So we know those two are coming back. But with Johnny Wilson specifically, fellas, Zach, I'll start with you. What I guess is like the next step for Johnny Wilson? We talk about like some flashes of brilliance for him, someone who decided to not go pro. I guess what are we looking for from him in 2023 for FSU to win a couple extra games?
Don't drop the football.
That's reasonable. Yeah.
I think that's the biggest part. And I think another underrated thing that he can improve on is being more of a red zone threat. We saw him be a red zone threat. And I'll get into it in a second, but we saw him be a red zone threat in like a game like Louisville, right? He stepped up when FSU needed him most and Tate Rodemaker needed him most, and created some huge plays towards the later portion of that game. But I think maybe even if it's a Mike Norvell thing, a Jordan Travis thing, use Johnny Wilson in the red zone more, have him utilize that size to go up and get the ball. I think that's an area FSU can improve on with his how they utilize him in 2023. Obviously, I think the most obvious or apparent one is he needs to catch the ball more consistently. I mean, he probably goes for 250 plus yards in the Oklahoma game if he catches that deep one. And I think he had another drop that night. He's had multiple other important drops throughout the season. And don't get me wrong. He's been a clutch player for Florida State, but for a guy that has NFL aspirations, that's a part of his game that both FSU fans want to see improve, and obviously NFL evaluators want to see improve if they're going to take him as a high draft pick, which we all think he's capable of being.
So FSU does lose. So you know what you have coming back with Johnny Wilson. We'll see what steps he takes. You know what you have with Micah Pittman. FSU loses Ontario Wilson, who quietly had 495 receiving yards, 30 receptions, career highs for him, 4 touchdowns, and really was a solid number 2/number 3 option with Micah Pittman. And that's what we always said, like Ontario Wilson should be, is probably like a number 3 guy. And you got to finally see like when he wasn't getting the majority of the coverage, safety shading over him. We're more going to Johnny Wilson. Pokey got some one-on-ones. You got to see some agility, some deep speed, athleticism. Brett, I guess, will it be difficult in your estimation to replace Pokey Wilson? My thought is like he's kind of a sneaky hard guy to replace, but I want to get your thoughts on it.
I don't know if I would say he's super hard to replace. I mean,
AB would. Where's AB in the chat?
He just put Pokey for MVP.
There we go.
But I mean, he's your number 2 wide receiver, and you have guys like you guys have mentioned. Darion Williamson is someone you expect to break out. I mean, you have Kentron, you have the freshman coming in. Like, you have depth. It's not like you're turning around and saying like, who do we have here to step in? So I don't think it will be too hard to replace him. I do think it will be, a bit by committee with a bunch of these guys breaking out a bit and getting some more reps. But I know you guys are the presidents of the Darion fan club.
We are the co-presidents. Dane and I are battling out, although the Justin Jefferson comp has got me a little shook right now. I think Dane might win that one. This kind of sucks. Dane, we look at the wide receiver composition. Should FSU, this was a pretty common talking point on the message board a couple of weeks ago. I think kind of slowed down. I think it'll probably pick back up with the Malik McClain transfer. Should FSU have gone after a wide receiver transfer to kind of round out that room? Like, do you think that was something that you would have, if you were GM Dane Draper, would you have maybe targeted a transfer receiver?
No, I think your room is so full, and you have guys with different, versatile skill sets. I don't think you really need to do that, especially when you're trying to like allocate resources, I guess, and you're so limited on scholarships, that sort of thing. I don't think that would have been a great usage. I mean, we still have needs. Of course, it still has needs. You want. Well, I was going to say you want a defensive end. I guess you got that in Gilbert Edmond. You want another defensive back, that sort of thing. Oh God. Let's look at the comment. Anyway,
don't look at the comments when you're talking. Just keep pushing along.
it's a good
Close
piece of
your eyes.
advice. But no, I wouldn't have. I mean, Pokey, obviously, I guess he moved on from that, but like a guy like Pokey, if you were to replace him, he's the obvious guy you would try to look to replace, and he offers experience, and he's someone who can take the top off the defense. And so maybe you want to go get a guy like that, but I think another year for all these guys coming back, and a lot of good athletes. I mean, you have a guy like Duspan. To me, if you're looking for someone who can take the top off a defense, I think he can certainly do that with a year of development. Maybe Hakeem Williams can even do that. I mean, he really is an exceptional athlete. Someone like that, another year of Kentron Portier. We'll see, but I think that room is loaded enough to where you don't need to go out and unload into like some special guy in the portal. Wide receiver.
Good show. All right, Dave's muting for a little bit. Time out, Dave. Recover. You almost had it there, buddy. Petered out at the end. As Keith Gordon correctly points out in the chat. God, this needs to end soon. Ja'Kai Douglas wasn't even mentioned, and like he's someone that came back from the shoulder injury late last season. Welcome back, Dane. And he flashed and he's ended both of the last 2 years on a pretty high note. So there's something there with him. Winston Wright is someone that we've kind of talked about briefly. Like if he gets back to his pre-injury form, and I still think that's an if. Like I'm not banking on that being a surefire thing at this point. But if that does happen, and I think this spring will probably be a good indicator, he'll be a year removed from the injury of like how much strides he's made in a few months span of the offseason program. If he gets back to his pre-injury form, I think then you're cooking with fire. Like then you're talking about depth and versatility and different body types, and there's a lot there. We've hinted at this one, Zach. I'll let you talk about him because you covered his recruiting as well. No, not as well. Like better than anyone nationally, and that was the Hakeem Williams recruitment. He's a guy that I think is still raw, but like man, there's some skill sets there that you just can't teach. Do we think he's like a day one contributor? I guess how are we going into the spring? Viewing, judging, grading Hakeem Williams?
The thing that's so intriguing to me about Hakeem Williams is I don't think the way he was utilized in high school is the way he's going to be utilized in Mike Norvell's offensive scheme at all, right? I think there's part of his game, at the high school level, right? You see some of the stuff, a lot of the concepts his team ran at Stranahan, short concept, a lot of screens, basically get Hakeem the ball as fast as possible and let him do what he does best and go make plays down the field. There weren't a lot of deep extended routes. That's just not what Stranahan does. And they're more up tempo. Wanted to get the ball out quick, and obviously FSU has more of a luxury of being able to have plays develop. And I think that's what I'm most excited about with Hakeem in the spring. I don't know as to whether he'll be a day one starter type, right? Like I don't expect that. I think Hakeem is a little bit ways to go and just, finding out his role as a true college wide receiver. But I mean, he's done it against the best competition in South Florida. He'd show up for huge games. So I'm not worried about the transition. I'm worried about, or not worried, but I want to see him make that move to what Mike Norvell wants him to be and Ron Dugans wants him to be within that receiver room. I think the sky's the limit for Hakeem. I think he's a superb athlete. Probably one of the best overall athletes on the football team. And I think he carries himself in a very professional way. And I think that's going to help him get on the field as soon as possible.
All right. Buyer Sonone with the wide receiver group, sponsored by
the Turner Group.
The Turner Group.
Yeah, there we go. Everyone in the chat, jump on in. Buyer Sonone. Good job, Dave.
Good.
Buyer Sonone, Destin Hill.
Sonone.
Sinone. Not that he exists. I think we all buy that he exists at this point. He is a person. Him being on the roster in 2023. Who reported that, Zach? Sam Spiegelman, is that right?
Yeah, from On Three.
Right.
I'm not gonna like sit here and doubt anyone's report, but
no, you guys at Sam Spiegelman if he doesn't show up in the spring. I don't want that blood on my hand. And if he does, retweet him and he was right and good on him. That is not a risk that I was.
Yeah, admittedly, I put more fuel in the fire yesterday when I tweeted out that Pat Surtain, the high school he attended was Edna Carr in New Orleans, Louisiana. And that is where Destin Hill attended during his high school career, which seems like forever ago at this point.
I mean, it was about 3 years ago. You challenge your inner Newberg there to just kind of stir the pot. Stir the pot. There is no need to mention where Pat Surtain went. You did. All right, last position group, mercifully almost done here. The offensive line, the trenches. AB, if you're here with us, jump in the chat and just say hello because we're going to talk about the big uglies up front. Although there's some, decent, handsome young men. Oh, never mind. Kid show live. Brent. Can't undo that one.
Did you have dreams about them too?
Mm-hmm. I'm sure you did.
Offensive line. This is an interesting position group because the additions to me in the transfer portal are as significant as the departures, and the departures were significant. Like you're talking about all ACC first team offensive lineman at left guard, Dylan Gibbons. Then Dimitri Emmanuel was at right guard. I think he was a third team all ACC player. And then Jason Turnitin was your swing tackle, ended up playing more than 600 snaps those. So much more than the swing tackle, right? And he ended up grading out fairly well by PFF, I think 60 to 65. Like he was replacement level. So those are three pretty important pieces that you have to replace. And how does FSU go about replacing them? Well, one, they're banking on returning players to an extent, but then two, the transfer portal. The transfer portal was huge for FSU, literally, figuratively. You add like 310 to 340 pounders on the offensive line, and Jeremiah Byers, Kendra Jones, and Casey Roddick. And that goes into the returners as well with Robert Scott, Maurice Smith, Darius Washington. Zach, I guess, how do you think all these pieces kind of meld? And I'm not even talking Bless Harris. I mean, there's other pieces as well. How do they all kind of meld and blend together as you see it? And I guess, what are you looking for this spring from that position group?
Yeah, well, like you mentioned, you lose Gibbons and Emmanuel, who are, you're both of your starting guards. So it was important for FSU to attack the portal along the offensive line, and specifically the guard position with guys like Keandre Jones, Casey Roddick, and even Jeremiah Byers, who I think could play either guard or right tackle. And then you return some important pieces. And I think you have some really talented freshman pieces that should, hopefully take steps in their game over the next, 8 months. And like a guy like Julian Armella, Jalen Early, you have more veteran depth pieces like Thomas Schrader, Bryson Estes, who are interior guys. So, Julian Armella and Jalen Early could be more tackle bodies for you. But I'm really encouraged by both the guys FSU brought in to help alleviate some of that immediate need for replacements along the line. And I think that only helps to allow for more development for a guy like Julian Armella, who we all think has a really bright future at Florida State. And then Jalen Early, who was promising at practice for FSU and is someone that the staff thinks very highly of. And I'm not mentioning a bunch of guys, I'm sure. That whole freshman class was really talented. I know, Quayshawn Sapp is a guy that was a true freshman this past season that FSU thinks could maybe be a really talented center down the line for them, or a guard. And there's a bunch of other guys in that class that FSU's high on. So, yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see kind of how that offensive line group molds together, right? That was a group that definitely had to replace some guys along the line. I didn't even mention a guy like Bless Harris, who was injured in FSU's first game last season, who went into the season as a starting tackle for the team. So that's another piece you get back. And yeah, I just think it can be a really talented group, and a group that we've They've been trying to build towards this, but a group with more depth than maybe we've seen during the entirety of Mike Norvell's era at Florida State. I think that's almost for certain.
Where do we think Jeremiah Byers lines up at? He was the UTEP offensive tackle transfer, someone that we liked, I think, before he entered the portal. And we were starting to do some research. Dane, Zach, and I enters the portal, ends up at Florida State, played right tackle at UTEP. But where do we think he ends up at FSU? Guard, tackle? What are we looking at, fellas?
I think he most likely projects as a guard, right? Especially at the NFL. I think he's more of that type of body. But the fact that that question can be asked and he can play tackle at a high level, especially right tackle, potentially even left tackle, who knows? But that positional versatility is something that Coach Alex Atkins has valued a lot, and that's something that Byers definitely has. But I feel like guard's probably the most likely. You'd agree, right?
I think they'll start him at guard.
Yeah. So I think that's ideally, like, yes, I'm with Dane. Like, that's where he probably projects at the NFL level. Because of his size, he's 6'4", so he doesn't have like prototypical offensive tackle size, but like the feet and the quickness, like he does have the ability to play tackle, but like we got to start looking like optimally, like what's your best five, right?
Yeah, you got to look at the other pieces.
So I'm going to throw this to Brett then. The dubious task of projecting what this offensive line will look like without having any information of the spring and who goes where and how they look at those positions. What do you think the day one offensive line will look like from left to right? Have fun with it.
Sure. Thanks, Brendan.
Mm-hmm.
I'd probably go Rob Scott at left tackle.
Okay.
Casey Roddick left guard. Maurice at center. Byers at right guard, and Bless at right tackle.
Damn, that's what I was going to do too. That's not as much fun. Don't sleep on Darius Washington to end the season off on a pretty high note, though. Byers at left guard is interesting Roddick at left guard is interesting because he is going to start his FSU career like learning how to snap the ball. Byers, Seminoles, Turner group. Is snapping important to you guys?
Oh, yeah, it's obviously important, Brendan. Let's move on.
Bye. Sorry, Colin.
Oh, bye. Look, Turner group. Check it out.
I get it. But with Casey Roddick, so like there is a chance, like let's say Casey Roddick starts at center. Then what would that have meant to happen like in the spring? Does that mean that you love Keandre Jones so much that you have to play him at guard? Or does that mean that Roddick just was that much better than Maurice Smith? Like that's kind of what we're weighing here, of like what happens and like the different variables.
But having those variables is a really cool thing.
Sure.
That's something that FSU hasn't had the opportunity to do in a while.
I mean, the depth is impressive. They add, again, 3 experienced transfer portal guys with like more than 1,000 career snaps for each of them. So yeah, that's helpful. And then with we have coming back, we mentioned Julian Armella, Jalen Early. Like this is, dare I say, the first time. All right, let's end it on this note. Byers Seminoles, the offensive line becomes a strength for FSU in 2023.
I think bye.
I'm kind of optimistic with that. With you, Dane. Okay, Brett, you too.
I think bye.
Zach, come on, 4 in a row. Let's go.
Strength compared to like, how are we measuring it?
At the scale of like, is it an above average Power 5 offensive line this year? Is it something that you can say you're winning on more often than not? You're not hiding.
Yeah, I'll buy that. Yeah,
I think so too. We're there. I think we're there. And, AB, don't Sonone us in the chat. Wow. Screw you.
Oh, no. But having that depth that you have, you're a team with playoff aspirations, and having that sort of depth, I think, adds to that a lot too. But also having a guy like Jeremiah Byers that we're talking about, someone with like legitimate, I mean, he's someone that you can like expect maybe to be on like an all ACC team, and like deservedly so. Like he's legitimately one of the best guards in the ACC. Guy like that, and a guy like Rob Scott, who you expect to be pretty good. You just have so many options and so many guys that you're optimistic about in that group. Yeah, they should be better, I think, and that should be a strength because they weren't a terrible weakness at full strength past year.
I'm with you, Dane. I think that's well said. All right, so let's let's end things here. We went position by position. We somehow went over like what would have been a full podcast and then a position preview. Not a position preview, a unit preview podcast. An hour and 30 minutes with me rambling and a lot of sophomore jokes going on. You guys are so mature. FSU starts Torah duty workouts on Friday. I'm not sure when the spring starts yet. We don't have that date, but
Probably like March, the second week of March, I would assume.
And we'll go to early to mid-April. It's kind of the standard there. How much better can this offense get? I mean, this was a top 10 offense in yards per play from an efficiency standpoint, top 20 offense in points per game. So borderline elite. It was very good to great. Can it go from great to elite? My initial inclination, this is off season, right? We're lying right now. This is line season, but like, why not? Like, you're bringing back almost everyone who matters. The players that you lose, I think you replace them with more talented players, at least more upside based players, and so the potential to elevate, to escalate things, I think it exists. Does anyone like disagree, or are we all kind of on the same page with that?
I'm on the same page. I think objectively on paper, you have a more talented offensive roster going into next season than you did in 2022. It's just about how well does this new group, it's a new group, even though you return a lot of the guys from 2022. You have to get all these guys to gel and work together well. And I think that's an important thing for Mike Norvell in this team to accomplish heading into this upcoming season. I mean, that's what your goal is every year, but you're going to welcome a lot of new faces along the offensive line. Your top two tight end contributors are probably going to be Jaheim Bell and Kyle Morlock. And then, obviously losing two of your probably top five productive receivers in Malik McClain and Pokey Wilson, who steps up, right? We are confident and we believe in some of the guys that are a little bit more unproven, but it's those guys' job to go up and rise to the occasion. And I think that'll be the ultimate tell on whether this offense takes another step in 2023.
Brett and Dane, do you guys agree this offense poised to move forward? Brett, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're going to get better at basically every position except maybe running back because you lose Ward, but still there you get the potential of Hill taking his spot and maybe having even more of a burst and impact on the game than Trayshawn did at points. So I think when every position group's getting better, that you expect the offense as a whole to get better.
Dano?
Yeah, I mean, on paper, it's just objectively better, like Zach said, and that's all we can really go off of. So, yeah, and we were talking about earlier to begin with, I mean, whether Jordan Travis can get even better, there's no reason to doubt him because anytime anyone's doubted him since he's been at Florida State, they've been wrong. So there's no reason to think this offense would even stall, let alone regress. You'd expect them to get better.
If I were to start a lawsuit against Florida State for stealing the JTrav nickname, would you guys join me in it? Make it class action?
No, I hope you lose all your money.
No comment, Brendan.
All right. Thanks to everyone for watching this, all 250 of you for pretty much the entire episode. I don't know what you guys were doing with your time there, but it is appreciated. For everyone listening on the podcast version of this, I am sorry. I know I don't apologize as much as I used to on the podcast, but I do feel like I need to apologize here. To Brett, to Dane, to Zach, thank you for joining me on this. In between the shenanigans, I think this was insightful and helpful to present what we think will be a picture of a really talented offense in 2023. To remind you guys, tomorrow evening if you're listening to the podcast, it'll be tonight, it'll be Thursday evening. We will have another live show on the Noles 24/7 YouTube stream with Chris Nee and with the fellas of X's and Noles to talk about the defense and kind of preview that group. So I will say goodbye for the Noles 24/7 staff for now, and we will see you guys on Thursday evening. I'm Brendan Snow. This has been On the Bench, sticking to landing. Nailed it.